Tonight we're back in the Psalms, and we're in Psalms 90 tonight. And what we'll do, we'll read through it, and then we're going to kind of break it down into a couple of sections, and we'll talk about that as we go through it tonight. Moses says, "The Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting you are God. You turn man to destruction and say, 'Return, O children of men.' For 1,000 years in your sight are like yesterday when it is past, and like a watch in the night. You carry them away like a flood. They are like a sleep. In the morning they are like grass which grows up. In the morning it flourishes and grows up. In the evening it is cut down and withers. For we have been consumed by your anger, and by your wrath we are terrified. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your countenance. For all our days have passed away in your wrath. We finish our years in a sigh. The days of our lives are 70 years, and if by reason of strength they are 80 years, yet their boast is only labor and sorrow, for it is soon cut off, and we fly away. Who knows the power of your anger? For as the fear of the Lord, for as the fear of you, so is your wrath. So teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Return, O Lord, how long? And have compassion on your servants. O satisfy us early with your mercy, that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Make us glad according to the days in which you have afflicted us, that the years in which we have seen evil. Let your work appear to your servants, and your glory to their children. And let the beauty of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish the work of our hands for us. Yes, establish the work of our hands." Now, as this psalm is attributed to Moses, there's no certain time that this is put in that you can determine. I don't think maybe that he had wrote this, but it is believed that it may be toward the end of when the Exodus out toward the end of the time in the wilderness, of him reflecting over everything, of the loss that was suffered, of everything that he had endured. But you can kind of break this psalm down, I believe, in two sections. I think the first section is a section to humble us. I think the things that he wrote here should humble us. The things that he writes, the things that he meditates on, the things that he thinks about should humble us. But also, I think the second part teaches us how to live, and how to live in the now. And sometimes I think that is something that we forget to do. But there's three things for us to remember in this. And this is in the first part. There's three things for us to remember. And then the last part, I think there's three things that will help us to pray. So let's look at this as we go through it. Let's look at verses 1 and 2. It says, "Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains you were brought forth, or ever you have formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, you are God." I think this first part, is that God is before all and over all. And I think this is to humble us. Notice he said, you're from everlasting to everlasting. You never change. You're always this way. God, when you think about God, he always was, he always will be, he always is. It's kind of hard for us to wrap ourselves around, because God doesn't work on time, does he? It's not about time, and everything that we do is about time. When we eat, when we get up, when we sleep, when we lose our battery. Oh, I think I may have just turned it off. Let me put that on the outside then. But everything we do is about time. And and Moses here, as he's talking how this humbles us. And look at the things in which we do. And he's going to go in and talk a little bit more about our time here as temporal. You know, when we look at ourselves as in relation to God, there's no comparison, is there? So he starts out here by noticing and examining and acknowledging how great God is, because God is over all. There's nothing, as he goes in and describes a few things here, there's nothing that God doesn't know. There's nothing that God can't do. There's nowhere that God is not at. So when we think of all the wonderful things of our life, and he says you're from generation to generation, God doesn't ever change. Now, we change. We may change what we do. We may change our location. We may change a lot of different things in our lives, but God doesn't change, does he? He stays the same. So the first thing I think that we need to do to humble ourselves in this is looking at this, is know, first of all, that God is over all. So there's nothing that we can do that we don't place God over it, and we should acknowledge that. But let's move a little bit farther and look at verses 3 through 6, how he explains this. He says, you turn man to destruction and say, return, O children of men, for 1,000 years in your sight are like yesterday when it is past. And like a watch in the night, you carry them away like a flood. They are like a sleep in the morning. They are like grass which grows up. In the morning it flourishes and grows up, and in the evening it is cut down and it withers. So I think the next thing he shows us here to humble us is we're temporal. We're not designed to be here forever. He goes on in verse 10 and describes this a little bit farther about what our time is, and by reason of health what it is. But it's about how temporal life is, how short life is, and we need to live our life knowing that. We need to make sure that some people live like they're going to live forever. And we need to make sure we realize no matter what our time here is on earth, it's short. It's just a little time. James 4:14. Remember how James says it? He says that life, whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow, for what is your life? It's even but a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanisheth away. It's just here for a little time. It's just temporal. And think about the things in which we think we're just here for a little while, but everything keeps going after that, doesn't it? You know, there's a lot about this song that makes me think about death. And I don't know if you ever think about death. I do a lot for a lot of different reasons. One, as a minister, I've been around death. Where I work at a funeral home, I'm around death every day. Talk to people every day that are either dealing with death, dealing with a loved one of a death, these types of things. And one thing that I've realized is that, life is short, and we think about things in terms of, how important things are, and that we show importance on that. Sometimes we think that this life can't go on without us. We think that we're something special sometimes in this. And I think that's why Moses starts out here about how wonderful God is, how great God is, that God has always been. We're nothing in compared to that. We're just temporal. And I tell you one thing I've always noticed is that when we have a funeral at work, when we go out, we're taking the casket out, and we're close to Dogwood Park. There's a party going on over at Dogwood Park. We could be carrying out a casket, and this family's whole world has changed, but the world is still going on, isn't it? The world is still doing everything that they're doing. It's not stopped one bit. You put that casket in a hearse, you're going to the cemetery. Matter of fact, you can't hardly get people stop on the road anymore when the procession is going by. It's temporal though. It really, I think about this almost every time especially when I'm going to the cemetery is, sometimes we think everything is just going to stop because we do. And I always notice everything is going on like normal for everybody else. It may not be for the family at that time, and it's sure not for the person, but the whole world is still going on. We're just temporal in this. We're just but a vapor that appears for a little time. Notice what Peter says about it when he's quoting Isaiah. He says, because all flesh is as grass, all the glory of man as a flower of the grass. The grass withers and its flower falls away. Now this isn't about being doom and gloom, but this is about facing reality. This is about first knowing who God is and what God is and how great God is. And it's to humble us, but it's also to humble us to realize where we are in the scheme of things. We're temporal. We're just a little while here. And as this song goes on, he's going to talk about what do you do and what should we do and how should we live in view of knowing that we are just temporal. We are just here for a little while. I think sometimes, just think about, all these things that we think are just so important to us. That we worry about, that we stress about. I think about this all the time because worry's an issue with me a lot of times. And I think about all the things that I think about, that I worry about, that keeps me up at night, that I think about. And then I think about how much time have I wasted versus how much time do I have here on this earth. It doesn't matter if we die old or we die young, we're going to. We're just here for a little while. And sometimes we can waste it on things by thinking we're going to live forever and the whole world revolves around us. It's hard sometimes to say out loud, but I think this is what the psalmist is saying. We've got to humble ourselves and realize where we are in the scheme of things and how great God is, and also what God has done for us and what we should be doing for Him in view of who He is and who we are. Who are you who am I that you should consider me, right? Who am I in the scheme of things? But we know what God's done. I'm not saying that we're not important to God. We're very important to God, but sometimes we're not as important as we think we are to what this world is. And we got to realize what our place is in it and what our responsibility is. But he's talking here that it's just temporal, and we've got to realize this. And he goes a little bit farther. Look at verses 7 through 11. He says, we have been consumed by your anger, and by your wrath we are terrified. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your countenance. For all our days have passed away in your wrath. We finish our years like a sigh. The days of our lives are 70 years, and if by reason of strength they are 80 years. Yet their boast is only labor and sorrow. For it is soon cut off, and we fly away. Who knows the power of your anger? For as the fear of you, so is your wrath. Now, think of Moses writing this, and if it was at the end of their wilderness wandering here, think of all he's seeing and what he knows about the wrath of God and all those that are going to perish in the wilderness because they weren't obedient to God. And here he's talking about how in view that God is all-knowing, in view that God is all-powerful and God is over all and we're just temporal, we're living in this life, think about the sin that's part of that. Of course, sin entered into the world, and it says as soon as they did that, then that's when death is going to come, as far as, even physical and the spiritual. You see how all of this interacts, but when we think about who we are, whereas the Bible says we all sin and fall short of the glory of God. It doesn't matter if we're servants of God, we're still going to sin, aren't we? At the very best we can do, we're not perfect people. So living in this temporal world, we need to be aware of that. We need to know that God knows, as He says here, these secret sins, and that God is all-knowing. He's all over all, and we're living this temporal world, and this world is full of sin. And we're doing all we can to be out of that. As the Bible says, we're not part of this world. We're not living in sin anymore, but we still sin. But we need to be aware of that. We can't live like there's no tomorrow and think I can eat, drink, and be merry and do whatever it is I want to do. We only have so much time on this earth, so much time to serve God, so much time to do the things that He wants us to do, so much time to praise Him and bring glory to Him, to let that light shine in the world. What are we going to do with it? You know, we've come from sin, as Paul said to those, that you've been sanctified, you've been justified, you've been set apart from how you were. Are we still going to live like that? Are we still going to go back to that? Remember, we only have so much time. You know, I don't know about you, even, and what am I now, 54? You know, that's old to me. I'm getting up there. You know, look, I'm losing it. It's gray. Everything's happening. But I still think of sometimes in terms of, this is how my mind works, okay, I have so many of this, probably so many summers left, so many winters left, so many this left, so many. We're trying to do some things around the house, and you know, when it comes to planting stuff, I don't plant trees like this anymore. I'll never enjoy a shade out of that. You know, I want to plant something I can get shade out of now. You know, I can't wait 20, 30 years down the road. I don't know if I'll be here tomorrow, but I don't know what 20 or 30 years are going to hold. You know, so you start thinking in terms like that. And that's what this psalmist is saying. That's really not a doom and gloom feeling, but we need to think and live in terms of, how am I going to live? How am I going to spend my time? How am I going to do the things that God wants me to do here, knowing that sin is all around us? Knowing that sin is there, that temptation is there. So are we going to spend it by doing these things, or are we going to spend it by doing these other things? So he starts out, I think, by wanting us to remember some things. Remember that God is over all, that we're temporal, that, remember, we sin and God sees that. He's all-knowing. He sees that. He sees how we're living our life. We can't hide anything from God. He knows those things. But then he goes on here, and he kind of turns the page a little bit, and I feel like he's teaching us how to pray and some things that we should pray for. Notice what he says here. He says, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Return, O Lord, how long? And have compassion on your servants. O satisfy us early with your mercy, that we may rejoice and be glad in our days. So here he starts out by, we need to number our days. So teach us to have the wisdom to live a life with the end in mind. How often do we live our life like that? Should we as Christians live our life with the end in mind? Or should we live our life and never think about the end? Yeah. Yeah. I'll be honest, when I was younger than I am now, I don't know how much I thought about it. I mean, when I became a Christian, I knew I wanted to live and go to heaven, but I don't know how much I actually thought about the end. Then in each year that's passed by, I started thinking about that end a little bit more, a little bit different, because it's a little bit closer. So we start thinking about that. And when we think about if we're living a life aware of the end, we need to live our life aware of how we're living now. So think about this. When it comes time, think about, is there anything that you can do for God that you think that you'd ever regret at the end? I regret doing this for the kingdom. There's not anything, is there? But think of it this way. Is there anything that you wouldn't do, that you should be doing and not doing, that you're going to regret? Now think about this. Is there something I should be doing and I'm not? Would I regret that? And whatever that is, that's what we should be doing, isn't it? If that's what I'm going to regret when the end comes, if I'm going to regret not doing it, then that's exactly what I should be doing. Because I should be living a life as if the end were there. But most of the time, we may live our life for a job. We may live our life just for our family. We may live our life for entertainment. We may live and we get in whatever it is becomes our idol, whatever we think is important to us. That's what we start living our life for. But I can tell you this, I've had individuals come in, or I've talked to people that were, as you say, on their deathbed. as a minister and had conversations with them. I've talked to individuals who come in and prearranging their own funeral that say, well, the doctor said I only have this much time. And what do you think's on their mind? What do you think they talk about? Their work? Think they talk about all the entertainment that they did? What do you think's on their mind? Exactly. What I wish I'd done, what's important to them now. Kind of narrows the field a little bit when you start thinking about that. It starts narrowing the field to what's really important. You won't find yourself, most of the time what I find people talking about is family and God. And their life that they spent. Either regrets they had or some things they're glad that they did, that they don't regret. Because that's all that's important to them now. All this other stuff that they thought was so important, that they worried about, that they spent their life doing, that didn't matter then. And at one point, it's going to come to that, isn't it? So we need to live our life in view of the end. Not dreading the end. Not, I may have asked this before. How many of you heard John stand right here and pray and then just say, Lord, this is a good day for you to come back. I pray that you would. What's the thoughts on your mind when he says that? I've had a few times I thought, I don't know about today. Let me see how I lived the last month or so. You start thinking about it. But that's how we should be, isn't it? We should be to where if this is the day, I don't have any regrets. Because what I would regret not doing for God, I've been doing that. And that's a real eye-opener, I think. I got to thinking about this, especially reading this psalm, and I even got to thinking myself, if I'm living my life with the end in view, what are some things that I always thought, well, I'll get to this for God. I don't really have time now to do this. I'll do it some other time. Well, when are we going to have more time? When's our life get to where it's not busy? When do we get to where almost every second from the time we wake up to the time we go to bed is accounted for? I can remember over here we did a class one time, raising godly children. And sometimes, I had us all write down our schedule from the time we woke up to the time we went to bed. And I started writing mine out. I thought, where do you have time to raise your kids? We haul them around everywhere, but where do you have time to actually teach them something? We get our lives so involved with a lot of things. Doesn't make them bad until they become all that we think about and all that we desire and all that we're achieving. And when that becomes that, then where's that going to be once all of this is over? Look at Mark 8:34. When he called the people to himself with his disciples also, he said to them, whoever desires to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow after me. I put in the wrong verse. Sorry about that. Rellin was talking to me, I guess. We'll blame that on Rellin. And he was talking to me. I'll still blame it on him anyway. But what profit is it to a man if he gain the whole world and lose his soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? So it comes down to that. What would I give in exchange for my soul? I want all this time to do this. I don't want the time to do this for God. When we think about giving, all we think about is the money? Well, I give this much. That's enough. What about giving a portion of my time? Set aside, okay, I have this much time this week and all week. Here's how much time each day or how much time during the week I'm going to spend doing something for God. How many actually plan that? We plan everything else, don't we? We plan our whole day of everything that we're going to do, and then where does it work out? How we're supposed to be giving with our funds, our money is not what's left over after we do everything else we want to do. God comes first, doesn't He? Yeah. I can remember asking Raju we were riding back from one of the villages one night in India. We were just riding, and I was just trying to think of conversation because I had no idea where we were at. I couldn't see out the window anyway. It was so dark. I couldn't understand what the driver was saying if he was talking to me anyway. So Raju, I could understand a little bit, and so I was just trying to have a conversation with him. And I just asked him, I said, well, what do you do for fun? He looked at me like I was nuts. I'm like, well, what do you do for, Monday night? What will you do? What are you going to do Monday night? Or what do you do on the weekend? I felt like an idiot after talking to him. But what I was getting at, what do you do other than go around to all these different churches and do all this? There really wasn't anything else he did. That's what he did. They had Bible study. If they wasn't at church on Sunday, they were having Bible studies at different places and trying to go into different places, and that was their recreation, or his anyway, evidently according to him. I mean, he looked like he didn't know what I was talking about, that this is what they do. And I'm thinking, okay, if somebody was to ask me that question, what would I say? I could give a whole list of stuff. And I was prepared to give him a list. I was prepared to have a big conversation until we got back to the compound. That conversation was pretty short. I didn't know what else to say. But it really got me thinking, though, is, how much time do I give as time? I've always tried to break down my study time. Because for me, anyway, I don't know if it's true for John or Titus or Mike or whoever else preaches, there's a difference in my personal study and studying for a lesson. And I've always tried to separate that. I don't know how much I've actually separated I'm going to do this because I'm a minister. I need to go do this or do this. Or how much I need to do because I'm a Christian. Because I'm a servant of God because this is the right thing to do. I don't know how much I do of that. I don't know how to separate it, I guess. But, and what is it that we're supposed to be doing? What Mike's supposed to be doing may be totally different than what I'm supposed to, because you have different opportunities. You have different connections. You have different abilities. So I can't look at someone else and say, well, that's what I'm supposed to be doing, because I don't know for sure if I'm able to do that. Or I don't know if I have that connection to do that. But there is something we can do. And if I'm living in view of eternity, I think that's what I should be doing. Which one do I have next? Psalms 20 or Philippians? Yeah. Notice what Paul talks about here. He says, though I also might have confidence in the flesh, if anyone else thinks he may have confidence in the flesh, I more so. Circumcised the 8th day, of the stock of Israel, the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of the Hebrews, concerning the law, a Pharisee, concerning zeal, persecuting the church, concerning righteousness, which is the law, blameless. But what things were gain to me, these I have counted loss for Christ. Yet indeed I also count all things lost for the excellence of the knowledge of Christ Jesus, my Lord, for whom I have suffered the loss of all things, and count them as rubbish, that I may gain Christ. Paul had every right to brag about his credentials, didn't he? He had every right to brag about everything that he accomplished, that he did and was able to do. But what's he finding important? Those things, how many letters he'd have behind his name, or what he's doing for God and what God has done for him. Sometimes what we find important, may not be as important as they are. I got a lesson one time on this. I was embarrassed, but I was proud all at the same time, if that makes any sense. I got asked one time, what's the college in Lebanon? I forgot the name. Cumberland College, yeah. When there's a lady that became dean there that called me, this is when I was at the first preaching place I was ever at in Hillham in 98. Yeah, 98, 99. But she had called, this was about 99, I guess, when she called. She was about to be made dean of that college, and she wanted me to come be part of the ceremony and say a prayer. And I was thinking, how do you even know me? Why would you call me to do this? Well, come to find out, I didn't know at that time. I didn't remember. But her mom had went to Hillham years ago, even before me, but she was in the hospital, and I'd went and visited her, and I spent quite a bit of time at the hospital talking with some of the family and just doing different things and talking to her. But anyway, she remembered her mom telling her that, and she wanted me to be a part of it. And I was honored to. I felt proud to do it until I got there. When I got there, they had all these seats laid out with names and stuff on it, and they did these introduction. This Dr. So-and-so, this PhD, all these names, and then it was Ron Strong from Hillham. That's all it was. wasn't no letters, wasn't no big hoopla about it. Wasn't just that. And it just embarrassed me because they were all there. Matter of fact, a senator was there. I don't know, there were several highfalutin, as I call it, because I was in a room with them before we walked out in this like possession, and I was standing there like a duck out of water. I didn't know what to say. I just stood there and listened to people talk about, I just flew in from Washington, I just did this, and there I am, But, all that was important for them, but the reason I was there was important to her. So that made it important for me. It wasn't about all the letters behind my name. It wasn't about all these other things. It was about something that I did really unaware that I even was connected with it. Yeah, I looked at it as just something I did, but it did mean something to them. And it just made me think, I feel out of place, but I think I'm right where I belong for the reason I was there. And the reason I say that is sometimes we think it's got to be, I'm not knocking education, I'm not knocking, succeeding in a lot of things of life. I think we need to know all we should know and all we can know. But sometimes we put importance on the wrong things. We put the most importance on the carnal things, the physical things, the things that we can look back and say, oh, look what I accomplished. And I think sometimes that's what we do. We rely on ourselves and think we're the one that did it instead of relying on God and thinking about Him. But, we need to live in such a way and do the things to produce fruit for Him. Look in John 15. Did I put John 15 up there? Yeah. Okay, yeah. Abide in me and I in you, as a branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless he abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him bears much fruit, for without me you can do nothing. Now, notice, let's go back to Psalms 90, if you don't mind, John. Notice he says, abide in me or you can do nothing. In Psalms, where are we at? 15. It says, make us glad according to the days in which you have afflicted us, the years in which you have seen evil. Let your work appear to your servants, and your glory to their children. And let the beauty of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish the work of our hands for us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. So he's talking about two things here. One, when he talks about being satisfied, as he said in the previous verse, with God, we need to pray, one, that we live life like we're looking toward the end. Two, that we're praying that God's enough to satisfy us. All these other things that we're looking at to satisfy us, to think that we need to be looking to God because He's the only one that can truly satisfy. Say we achieve all of the things that we want to achieve. What do we really have in the end? Are we fully satisfied then? Need to be satisfied in God, but also he says here, establish the work of our hands for us. Make sure the work that we're doing is for Him and that He gives us the strength to do it. Because he says here, or he said in John 15, that unless I abide in Him, I can't produce the fruit that I'm supposed to produce. I can do nothing outside of Him. So I may rely on myself in achieving all these things, but my strength actually should come from God. He should establish my hands. He should be the one that is guiding the work in which I do. Again, for His kingdom. What things am I doing for His kingdom? Through the strength in which He gives us. In Psalms 27, look in Psalms 27. I know I skipped over it earlier. It says, the Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked came against me to eat up my flesh, my enemies and my foes, they stumbled and fell. He's my strength. He's who I should rely on. So notice as he goes through this psalm, he says, God, you're over everything. We're just temporal here. And that should humble us to realize who we are, but most importantly, who you are. It's not to make us feel bad about who we are. It's to make us feel good about who God is in relation to that. I don't want God to be on the same level as me. Do you? He wouldn't be much of a God. I don't think there would be justice. I don't think there would be righteousness. I don't think there would be holiness as God does, because all those things come from Him. I'm righteous. I'm holy. I'm that because He's that. He gives me instructions for that, how to live to be that. I can't do it myself. So He shows me how to be humble, how to live in such a way of looking for tomorrow, how to live in such a way that I'm living with the end in sight. Because that's going to affect how I live now. So when I get to there, I'm not looking back to now and saying, I wished I'd done this. I regret not doing that. There's not anything we can do for God that we'll ever regret if we're doing what He tells us to do. But there is things that we're not doing that I can look back and regret. Now, I've got to preface that by saying, what is it that I'm able to do? What is it that I have opportunity to do? Because that's when I have the responsibility to do it. What is it that I can do that I'm not doing now? That Him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is what? It's sin. And each of us know what we can do. Each of us know what we should be doing. Each of us know what we are doing, and we should be proud of it, that we are letting God's glory shine. So as you think about this psalm, I think it's a very realistic look at what our life should be in the now and in view of eternity. Any final thoughts? I know I probably had stopped and gave much time for speaking, but I don't know about you. It's kind of a pretty good eye-opener for me. Because I'm around a lot of death a lot anyway, and I think about a lot of these things, and that's how I viewed this psalm. In the view of that is how short life is, and life still goes on. It doesn't revolve just around me, even though I think it does. I think that the place I'm at that's been there since 1935 will fold if I'm not there. And I get an eye opener every once in a while to know. It'll go on without me just like I wasn't even there the next day. In my mind, I don't think it can. In their mind, I don't think they give it a second thought. The things that we spend our time and really think that are so that we put all our time and all our stress and all our worry in, I don't think that's the things we're going to be thinking about when we're facing eternity. And I think that's the things we need to be thinking about now. Any final thoughts? Okay. Appreciate you listening.